Hello, I'm football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the FUT Weekly Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to week 24's content episode. And I am without, once again, Josh, because he was away, he's now back, but he is ill. So hopefully he gets well soon and we can catch him for this week's gameplay pod, the supporter episode this week. But in his stead, well, not in his stead, he was going to come on anyway, we have Seb, who is going to be an interesting addition this week for sure. Welcome to the podcast, Seb. Good to have you on for a debut.
Oh, I mean, thank you so much for having me. And Josh, thank you for either getting out of the way and letting me be here in your stead or, avoiding me, whatever it was. But I hope you get well soon, my friend.
Yeah, you'll get more airtime, so that's nice. And so for those who don't know, you probably don't, Seb is a game designer for Football Manager, which means his insight is going to be very interesting. But we should say this is in a personal capacity. We're not going to be talking about Football Manager particularly, but we are going to be getting your insight on game design, which will be interesting. And actually, just as an introduction, you're a committed Ultimate Team player. Is there a particular player in the sort of long history of Ultimate Team that kind of stands out to you as someone you'd like to kind of shout out?
Yeah, so I think like many people who probably listen and play, I've had like various eras of Ultimate Team involvement. So, there's the pre-uni back with 𝗪𝗡𝗪𝘀𝗀 and all of that. But honestly, I can't remember any of the players other than just, here was a team that I could R2 and do rainbow flicks and good times. I think over the years, I've always had a soft spot for KDB. I'm a Leeds fan, but Leeds aren't always that well represented in FUT. And then ironically this year, when we are relatively well represented, I've avoided our Evos because I'm foolish. So I think for non-Leeds options, KDB has always had a soft spot for me. I've always tried to pack his Team of the Year card, always failed, so instead tried to trade up to it. But I think in between those two areas, my actual favourite might be that, the first time we had those low drivens, and then just before that, so there was the 𝘬𝘀𝘀𝘀 card that he just got a Team of the Week every week. So every week I was upgrading, losing coins. And then I think just before that, about FIFA 18, when there was quite a nice Serie A squad you could put together. So your Mertens, your Gomez, and then 𝘭𝑪𝑖𝑐. So I think if I had to pick one that I just think, what do I think of when I'm thinking back and enjoying Ultimate Team? That like 5-star week for thinks he's Cristiano Ronaldo, 𝘵𝗵𝗽𝘁 might be the one for me.
Yeah, he's had some good cards over the years, right? Like there was the Scream version I remember being good as well. Good shout. Right, let's talk about more players because we're going to go into doing the pound for pound powerhouse, a player who's been I guess looking particularly good value over the past week or so, ideally. But we start, of course, with you picking the winner for the week before. So we had the Fantasy FC 𝘬𝘬𝘀 PSG player. We had the season pass Baltimore and the Fantasy FC Simon, the Bayern player. Actually, all women's players this week. So who would you be picking from those three?
I would love to endear myself to you as our glorious host and say, thank you for attempting the pronunciation before I did, so now I'm off the hook. But 𝘬𝘬𝘀, the only reason I'm not going with her is I think the reason she's a good pick and a not good pick is that card has existed several times in Pina, in Wilson. There's something, that sort of card. So I feel like I can achieve that card elsewhere. So my pick is a player that I don't think many other versions exist. And it maybe ties nicely into last week, talking about, the 5-3-2 or 5-2-1-2 and the 3 at the back. Every week I try a 3 at the back and it fails, but I try again every week. And someone who's been amazing for me is Baltimore on that left. She has that fantastic combination of ability to defend, not maybe the defensive playstyles, but seems solid enough, has good defensive stats, but that rapid going forward, especially when the whole left flank is hers, you can go from winning the ball, near your own corner flag to the opposition's corner flag with a couple of R2s. And that has been game-changing for me in the way I've tried to make my 3-5-2 work. And I've actually started trying to Evo players that can do that in my own, my more standard 4-3-3 team.
Nice. Yeah, it's always nice when, you try a player somewhat, I guess, coincidentally, or, you end up using a player and you're like, well, actually, there's something about this player that I want to, replicate. And now with Evos, you kind of can, which is cool. Right, let's move on to this week's pound for pound then. And I will start with the listener nomination. So Carl-Eric went for Raheem the Dream. Meta play styles and upgrade potential and whatnot, but he can also play whipped Trivela crosses, and most importantly, has a custom body type and running animations. Can't miss out on that. And he's always been good for that, actually, just kind of slightly unpredictable because of that. And then we can move on to your nomination, Seb. Who are you going to be going for this week?
Sure. So I guess I'll keep that theme going with the women's players. There was someone I looked at who I want to call out before I move on to my actual nomination. And the only reason I didn't go with her is because I think she'll find upgrades hard to come by. But that 𝗵𝗍𝗍 discard player, the Argentinian centre mid from Liga F, you look at her playstyle's maybe unideal, although Press Proven Plus, I think, has some room to play with if you then combine it with her attributes of pretty high agility in 90, very high balance in 98, then reactions and composures, which always seem, you always want those anywhere on the pitch. 94 and 96, which is wild for just a base card. You don't need to worry about evoing those up when we can evo these cards. So I think she would be really, really strong. But because you're probably stuck with that, I don't think there are many upgrades coming her way. I'm going to go with 𝗏𝘅. So not dissimilar in terms of the style of player, a smaller midfielder who in the middle can just, do those turns that we love. Just do those circles, find the space for your bigger players, and potentially some better opportunities for upgrades with Manchester United and the WSL. Although worth noting that this often seems to happen when we get live cards. We're waiting about 2 weeks for most of the domestic fixtures in the women's players, whereas the men's players, already nearly finished. So if you want someone now, maybe not. But if you're just starting the game and you need a card who's good now and will be better later, I think 𝗏𝘅 is a great choice.
Yeah, and I think really nice maybe midfield sub option as well, because has pretty much most of the things you'd want in an attacking sense, but then also has intercept, so can, pick the ball defensively if need be. But yeah, it's going to provide quite a lot going forward, I think, especially with that kind of dribbling and passing ability and pace as well.
I think the one thing I'd want in there is, and hopefully with an upgrade, you might get a low driven or a finesse. So the plus is incisive and tiki-taka, which is amazing. You mentioned the intercept, which is just useful anywhere. I haven't evoed striker who has intercept and anticipate, which is great. Quick step is nice. And then, I think just unless you're going to hold her back, and I wonder if in the defensive context you want someone who's just a little bigger, who can cover a bit more space. So if you're playing, classically the two midfielders or even three, you're maybe hoping for a finesse or low driven just to round her off in the midfield.
Yeah, I think, a very good starting point. Let's move on to, I think, actually, a nomination from Josh from Beyond the Grave. He's gone for the 𝗵𝘅𝗀𝘀 man of the match. Says incredible for a 3-back wide mid, brilliant mix of playstyles and insanely cheap for what will be a rare card. But then he adds, not knowing that you're going to nominate 𝗏𝘅𝗀𝘀, I would have gone for 𝗏𝘅𝗀𝘀, but 𝗵𝘅𝗀𝘀 has a bit more evo potential, which a good endorsement for your pick actually. And I myself, being the good host that I am, I'm going to pick a nice transitional linking pound for pound nomination so we can move on to what we're going to chat about next, because I'm going to go for Matthias Nunes, the City right back, the Fantasy Premier League live item, who has that intercept plus. It's a little bit of a cheeky one because by the time you're listening to this you may not be able to unlock Nunes actually, but I do think he's probably up there with some of the best upgrade potential there is amongst these fantasy live players, and he has an already kind of really strong selection of playstyles. I say strong selection of playstyles, I guess he is missing a few, but the point of the upgrades is that he'll gain some. So he's got Intercept Plus, Whipped, Press Proven, Quick Step, Relentless and Bruiser, which are all really good. Really nice, well-rounded mix of stats. Good roles as well, although, it'd be nice if he got the fullback plus, I suppose, because he's only got plus at the moment. But yeah, it just looks really solid, and he could also play in centre mid. He's going to need some passing play styles if you want to do that, because he doesn't have any at the moment, but potentially that might come. So yeah, I think he's an interesting one. Someone that I guess is probably, one of the top picks from this selection. But yeah, the other thing to say on the topic of this Fantasy Premier League live new kind of, I guess, concepts that EA have come up with and introduced as part of this Fantasy FC kind of period is that you, Seb, have been quite involved in Fantasy Premier League over the years, a bit of a hobby. I know you're perhaps slightly less committed these days, but it must have been interesting to suddenly see this combination of both things. We've had live items, obviously, in the game for a long time, but we haven't had ones that tie so directly into probably the other most similar thing to many people, which is FPL.
Yeah, so I think, I guess, explain a little bit of my FPL history. Played for many years, as I'm sure many people have, and got lucky a couple of times to get a good rank, maybe slightly too obsessive with, the stats and what have you. Ended up doing a little bit of content for Fantasy Football Scout around FPL. Not doing that currently at the moment because children and life, you know how it is. And also a bad rank. So, I wasn't playing seriously, guys, honest. However, I think hopefully I can provide a little bit of insight into how FPL may work, how it ties into FUT. I think we don't need to go super deep for this. The most important thing to know about FPL, especially when you're looking at 1 week, that's it. You aren't having these players for a season or 2 games or anything. It's one match. It's so random. Like you could say, if we had Mo Salah in here, I know he's not done that well this year, but typically he's the famous FPL player who just will return season after season. Haaland more recently in the last couple of seasons. You can have them in this selection and think, oh, that's the best player. And then it's just the day that they miss 5 chances. And you made the right, in inverted commas, choice, but the outcome didn't agree with you. So I think when we're looking, and we can move on to how these players are going to upgrade and maybe some strategies for what you're going to pick. But I think that the most important thing to consider here is, if they got no upgrades, or the only upgrade for 1 point, whatever it is, would you be happy with your pick? Maybe it's a player you want to Evo. Maybe it's a player from your favourite team. Because if you pick someone you don't enjoy and they get the 8-point upgrade and you're not going to use them, then maybe all you did was get some slightly better SBC fodder.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And we have ended up recording this a bit later in the week than would be ideal for this, because I think many people will have had to have selected their players by this point. But yeah, I think actually saying go out and pick this player would have been really difficult anyway, because as you say, it's a one-off game, it's so random, and actually probably picking a player that has maybe the play styles you like, or is a player you like, or plays for a club you like, or fits your team, is going to be maybe a better shout than thinking about their upgrade potential, which is kind of nice, I guess, like taking a bit of the sort of gamification away and being like, well, actually I like this player, or they help me in some way, but from a less kind of like they need this upgrade to be good, is probably quite a good way of looking at it. And they do, because of the overall rating, which I think is quite good, if they don't get upgrades, they are probably going to be decent in evolutions actually, which I think is a nice thing, because 85 obviously is going to fit most. And even if they get 1 or 2 upgrades, you can see them fitting evolutions. Even if they go up to an 88, you can see them fitting evolutions. And it's actually just worth kind of thinking a bit about what the upgrades are. So the points that I guess are worth talking about, actually maybe I'll run through them all. So if you get 0 to 1, they'll get +1 overall boost. So they'll go up to 86 regardless. And they'll get an additional roll plus actually, or plus, sorry. And then 2 to 3 points, they're getting all roll pluses for their main position, and a +2 overall. 4 to 5 points, they're getting a +3 overall boost, and then all rolls plus for all positions. And they're getting a second play style plus and 1 play style. So that 4 to 5 point mark is where you're really starting to see a sort of significant bump, because they're getting 2 playstyle pluses at that point, and they're getting the extra playstyle and a +3 overall. And then for 6 to 7 points, it's a +4 overall boost and the same upgrade as before, but an extra regular playstyle. And then for 8 points or more, it is the same upgrade as the last one, but an extra overall and 5-star skill moves or 5-star weak foot. So yeah, it's a kind of very, I guess, I was going to say, like, there's actually quite a lot of like variation in terms of the upgrades you can get, especially for 1 game, which is quite rare, I think, in Ultimate Team. But do you think, knowing what you know about Fantasy Premier League and also, I guess, the game, do you think there's actually quite a kind of reasonable upgrade sort of scaling thing, or would you like to see it work differently if it was to come again, which I think is quite likely actually?
Yeah, I think, just to answer your last question first, I think I wouldn't be surprised if this was a little feeler for maybe something that could happen in the future. We've had live cards in FPL in FIFA in Ultimate Team EFC for a long time, but not quite in this way. Like, they've always been a direct upgrade based on EA's. We watch a match, we score a goal. We've got them currently right now, right? I think going via FPL is a really interesting route, because FPL itself, at least the way I understand it, and no one's ever told me this, but it basically exists to increase engagement with the Premier League. So I'm very happy to watch Leeds play anyone, obviously, and I think most people are happy to watch Arsenal play Liverpool. But when maybe Brighton play Brentford, is it less interesting to the majority of fans unless you have a Danny Welbeck in your team? And then suddenly you're invested in that match in a way you weren't previously. I think that's the route that, with live cards often EA have gone with Ultimate Team. So I'm invested in real football, and I draw that connection between my fantasy, my Ultimate Team, my made up players, and the real world of football. And I think that's quite a sticky piece of emotional like game design, effectively. I wouldn't be surprised if they then, if this is a success, rolled it out in the future. And as you suggested there, I'd be interested to see if we could do this over a couple of weeks, and without going too deeply into how I would mess with the evolutions and upgrades if I could, less of a overall upgrade like we see with other live cards, like get a play style, get an overall card boost or what have you, and go specific. So FPL gives you the opportunity. You know, we've got those 12 attacking contributions and stuff with the other fantasy cards. We have the opportunity here, potentially, to go, you scored a goal, cool, +1 shooting. It was a side foot, so +5 to your finishing attribute. You did the defensive contributions, upgrade some defensive stats. I'd be really interested in seeing that work with quite specific upgrades to the attributes. And it's quite involved. You know, it needs the hardcore players, so I think, to engage with this. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for continuing investment and engagement with Real World and with Ultimate Team, and then also upgrades we don't normally see. So even though we're beyond the days of, a +1 Team of the Week upgrade and you can't upgrade attributes that aren't already high because there's a system, they've got around that, and I think it's brilliant. Let's go further. Let's create some really interesting cards that you can't get in other ways because their attributes are based on real life events that meant that this player got 99 volleys when they were nowhere near it because they scored an amazing volley or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's something that people have been wanting for a while. I know they tried to do a little bit of that through Team of the Week, but obviously, Team of the Week is not exactly the most exciting content nowadays, and something like this really does make sense in that context. I think the way that they've done it for regular fantasy players, where they have that contributions element, does make it interesting. But I think, as we mentioned last week, it makes it a little bit hard to kind of track almost. It's like you're maybe then looking at apps like SofaScore or whatever to work that out, and it's not obvious where to find the Opta data that they're using. Whereas with something like this, it's very much open for people to kind of very easily see, and it might not be the most like in-depth scoring thing that it's kind of made to work in that kind of game context, but it is at least accessible. And also a lot of people do play Fantasy Premier League and so are aware of how it might work, and watching a game would be able to kind of think in their head, oh, that's exciting, that player's going to get an upgrade. So I think it is a good approach and something that, I hope they do in the future. Another interesting thing is how you unlock the players, something that we've not seen before. You play Rush with a player from that club, and then it gives you the player back, which is quite a nice tie-in, I guess, kind of, showing that some club allegiance to some extent, and then getting the player in return. And there's not really that much of it's a very much a free card. I know you are doing something, but it's quite easy to unlock. So I think, that's quite good, I guess, from a sort of game design perspective. Is that something we should see more of? I kind of think maybe it's better as sort of like a novelty thing here and there, perhaps. But
so I think from a game design perspective, the interesting thing here, and it's maybe a wider point than just this one example, is what do we do to earn rewards, cards, whatever it is in the game? And I think here, as you say, it's one match with a team that hopefully you enjoy anyway, although don't do it by mistake. I nearly got a card by mistake by trying to do Evos. So make sure you know what you're doing there. But I think it's easy enough, right? It'll take you, how long's a Rush match? 7 minutes. So you can do this in 15 minutes probably. So I think that's fine. But to extend that concept, I think sometimes we see with Evos, play 3 matches, but claim your Evo in between each of those 3 matches. And it feels a little bit like busy work, for want of a better phrase. And look, I'm obviously looking at this from the outside, so I don't have the privilege of knowing how this works or what their goals are, and maybe they share these thoughts. But I wonder if we could get a bit more interesting, and that doesn't mean going back to score a chip shot with these players, ways of unlocking players, a way that makes it feel like, yes, it's a grind, but it's a grind that's, I'm enjoying the grind itself, not just the end result. It feels like there's a little bit of that disconnect between the thing I want and what I have to do to get it. And it makes it feel not like a job, but you often see people saying, right, logged on, did my stuff, logged out. From my point of view as a game designer, that's maybe not the game I want to deliver to you. I don't want you to log on, tick some boxes and log out. I want you to log on, enjoy yourself and log off. And maybe that can create, the former, which I think can be a bit of a problem. Mentioning those chip shots, something I did just want to say as well, which I think ties into this. You see with icon swaps, bringing something like the icon swaps back, but with that like chip shop objective, completely get why. There's that idea of challenge, right? It should be hard to get R9, so we need to create something that requires not just put the controller down, but it requires you to do a thing that is difficult to achieve in game. Therefore, you feel like you've received a reward that is proportionate to the effort you put in. However, I wonder if sometimes there's that disconnect between how is this game currently playing today and how are people playing it and the objective we've set out. And I'm sure you've done the same as me, Ben, with those chip shots. I exchanged them with someone else, and then we both either put the controller down, or if one of us needs a win, we get it. Again, I don't know if that was the intention. Yes, it's taken me some time. I've had to spend my time to earn an R9. That R9 is not free. They're free in terms of coins, but I've spent my time. But I think the way I've spent my time is not what they were after. I think, off the top of my head, I'm not sure. But, should we be hiding these behind more things like tournaments or what have you? Maybe people don't want that, competitive grind all the time. But I don't think the goal is, I scored a chip shot, I let my opposition score a chip shot, and then we put our controller down. I don't think that's what they wanted out of that.
Yeah, I've had an interesting kind of, I think, change in my approach, partly because, I've pushed in this direction where essentially I haven't done that objective and I won't. Like, I don't want to be playing gameplay that I'm not enjoying, if that makes sense. Like, I do enjoy the gameplay generally. Like, I know that's not necessarily a popular view, but like, if I'm playing with my team and I'm just like, I don't know, like, even if I'm playing in champs or whatever, like, I do like that. So I don't really want to be spending my time doing a sort of weird, like, gameplay experience that feels very transactional. And I guess, that will mean that I don't get certain rewards. Like, I'm not going to get R9. And maybe there are some that if they're like very unique evos that I really need, maybe I will do it. But like, generally, I'm trying to kind of minimize that, because I know for a fact, like, it makes me feel kind of burnt out, because it just feels like you're, as you said, like, it's busy work. It's not like the kind of game that I want to engage with. So, and actually the great thing about the game currently is you can kind of pick and choose your battles more than you've been able to previously. Like, by not getting that R9, I'm not missing out massively, actually, which is kind of crazy to say. So yeah, I think that's something that, maybe more people taking that approach would kind of increase enjoyment as well. But encouraging it so much that I can see why so many people are doing it. And I think it probably does lead to people getting kind of burnt out. And it's like they're forcing engagement, but actually what's like the long-term cost of that engagement, and how much the engagement they're seeing is people wanting to complete things rather than wanting to play, which is, I think, a concern that I hope will cotton on to.
I massively respect your approach to that. And I think, as you say, that probably is the intention. They want to provide enough things for enough people that you don't have to do everything. We need to be aware, though, that often people who play a game like this and listen to a podcast like this, we have a proclivity to want to do everything. Like, that's in our soul, and it's hard to fight. And I'm one of those people. I think the approach I take to get maybe sort of more meta to just Ultimate Team in general, and it keeps me sane, is to remember that there is no end goal. There is no Ultimate Team. I don't ever finish my Ultimate Team. If I do, it's because the next game is coming out in a week. And I feel like, and I'm so guilty of this, I feel like I play to build towards a goal that doesn't exist. That's a really powerful gameplay loop, right? That's used in a lot of games where, the reward keeps shifting and I play to get rewards, but then when I use those rewards, I'm just using them to get more rewards. I think it's really important for your own sanity to try and remember that the team you're using today for whatever objective you're trying to complete is your ultimate team right now. So enjoy that. And, your approach to say, you know what, I don't want to score chip shots and I will forgo Ronaldo or whatever for that, is the sensible approach, but it's very hard to convince ourselves to want to do that sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And it will be interesting to see whether there are any kind of like changes that EA make longer term to try and kind of shift the way that people engage with the game, because I kind of wonder whether it might take its toll in the future. And actually, certainly that sort of end game element is something that's really interesting, because the way that my game ends every cycle is drifting away from the game with a team that isn't complete, or ultimate, right? But that has never bothered me. It's like, okay, well, I kind of drift away from it, and that's because the way that I play the game is not necessarily to build towards an ultimate team, which is kind of ironic, but it's to enjoy the gameplay, and there's a competitive element to it too, so it kind of works. But it's weird because that obviously isn't what is implied by the title of the game, and also the way that the game is structured to some extent. I
think in the past, I've often, my approach to that is trading and trying to build, this massive war chest of coins. Out of interest, I logged back onto 𝗵𝘃𝗰𝘀𝘀 the other day, I had 9.5 million coins sat there and a team of
Probably
98
similar.
rated players. And I was like, why do I have those coins? Like,
Yeah.
cool, I did that. Should I not have just splurged all of those on packs? Because they're now doing nothing. And so something, again, just for my own sanity that I've tried, especially this year, I have like 150k right now. I tried very hard to spend the coins I earn. Sure, if you're saving towards a medium-term goal, great. But if you're just saving for the fun of saving, even someone like Nate, right? I know he often earns coins for the sake of coins, but he enjoys that. You know, he is playing a trading game. But then you see it Team of the Year, you see it Team of the Season. He uses those coins to buy packs or to do things. Was it a couple of years ago he went and bought up every one of a player on the market, which is fun. If you log back on and see you've got 9 million coins, you maybe missed, you know, what you're meant to be doing with those coins during the cycle. And for me as well, you know, I can get obsessed with trying to earn coins, trying to not lose coins on stuff. So taking that more gentle approach of like, earn the coins, spend the coins, I think helps me have fun in the game and not get, for want of a better way of putting it, too obsessed with the day-to-day grind.
Yeah, interesting. And actually, you know, we should probably take a break now. We've talked for a while about these, you know, engagement-related concerns, I guess. It'd be interesting to hear from anyone, you know, watching this, listening in, what your thoughts are on kind of the approach the game has to engagement and whether you feel like you want it to shift and also what engages you in the game. Because I think that's always quite interesting. It's quite different for different people as well. So, yeah, send those thoughts in and we'll take a break and be back. Actually, maybe we'll dip back into fantasy a little bit and then we'll move on to talking about what's to come because there's some interesting discussion points around that as well. So we'll do that just after this. Hello, and in this break, a quick reminder that the pod is made possible by supporters. The pod didn't used to be weekly. Yes, FUT Weekly wasn't actually weekly for a time. And then someone suggested setting up the Patreon. And since then, the pod has been weekly. And in fact, it's been twice weekly because there is that supporter episode every single week. So if you'd like to catch that episode and keep the podcast going, it's just £3 a month to do so. And you get loads in return. And there are perks higher than that, including access to the Discord too. So if you're interested and would like to support the podcast, then head over and search Support FUT Weekly. Go to Patreon and it's very easy to sign up. If you are a supporter keeping the podcast going, then a huge thank you for doing so. And if you do consider supporting, a huge thank you too. Right, let's jump back into the pod. Hello and welcome back after the break. Right, let's go back to talking about fantasy as it is currently briefly, or maybe not too briefly. We'll see what we have to say about the players that are around at the moment. It's sort of interesting because there are quite a few discard players that are good, but we also have some quite, I don't know, like some of those like, what is it, like 20k to kind of 150 to 200k players that seem better than maybe we see with other campaigns, and that might be partly because they have upgrade potential, so there's more excitement. But yeah, what do you kind of make of some of those? Are there some that you would pick out as being strong options?
I feel like I should immediately cheat and, since you said strong, go for 𝘵𝘅𝘀𝘀𝘀. That for me is just in terms of, you know, a FUT legend and an interesting card to use on the pitch. 1k as I read it right now, maybe go a little bit higher if there's upgrades due. Potentially not many upgrades because of the club he's associated with, but I think the card is good enough now, right? And probably plays above some of his playstyles or attributes because it's a 𝘵𝘅𝘀𝘀𝘀, I believe. Does he have a unique body type in game, or at least a massive body type?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah. So you can do some special stuff with that card. I think just below that as well, there's some interesting choices with the 𝘬𝘬𝘦 has often been quite good in FUT and maybe good for upgrades. Although I think Nate made this point last week, which is those cards with 2 player style pluses maybe are actually less attractive for upgrades, but safer. So if you get a one player style plus card, you know, maybe the Vandenberg for centre back, who potentially could be amazing if you get the right upgrades, you're gambling a bit there. Whereas the 𝘬𝘬𝘦, you know, he's got 2 already, so you're not going to get anything else there, but you will get 2 new base play styles. It looks like they may be upgrading a base to a plus with a lot of them so far. So you could argue you're getting slightly more marginal gain with like a 𝘬𝘬𝘦. But I think the higher upside picks are those ones with 1 play style. And as you said, coming in that price range of anywhere between discard and a couple of 100k.
Yeah, I think there are like some decent options around. And with a lot of these, you know, I guess their prices sometimes don't increase hugely significantly once they get their upgrade, as we talked about with Nate. So in some ways you can kind of just like not worry too much about like picking them up before the upgrade. Sometimes after the upgrade, they'll still be quite reasonable. So I think it's worth considering that. Nice. Well, let's I guess we get to actually talk about.
Well, one more question for you, if I may.
So
sorry. We've got a couple of cards with Quick Step and Rapid. What do we make of that? Obviously, gameplay discussion can be separate on there, but just from a content point of view, I think that's the first time EA have done it themselves. It's been possible in Evos, but it's the first time they've deliberately done it. I wonder if that's because they've tested something and gone, okay, this does actually work, or is it a case of like, we've also not seen many finesse and low driven, although we have seen a couple. I think 𝗏𝗀, the hero, had that. Are they going, there's a sort of mini power curve thing here where it's not just 2-player style to 3-player style plus, it's 2 really good, in theory, well-connected playstyle pluses.
Yeah, well, one thing that's kind of interesting is I think they've been relatively generous with Quick Step in Evos for defenders this cycle. And I wonder whether they've just thought, well, actually, the sort of base level that we have in terms of defensive pace is high enough that actually that is fine to kind of give that very strong buff to pace. Because I think Quick Step and Rapid, they do kind of work side by side, because Quick Step tends to give you kind of a bit of an increase in that sort of, I don't know, initial straight line run, and then Rapid can kind of make a player faster over longer distance, I think. So they do work together. And I think if we didn't have centre-backs with high pace and with Quick Step, it would be more of a concern. But actually it feels like, I don't know about you, but I feel like when I'm playing the game, generally, like I have centre-backs with Quick Step, like 88 pace, and they can generally, if you get the kind of angles right, they can generally keep up with most, if not all, attackers, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I will not play a centre-back without Quick Step Silver at the moment, and I'm looking to get is it the In All Areas Evo on the, I did a Van der Ven. The one meta Evo I did this year was the Van der Ven. I've got a Jockey Plus on him at the moment. I would love to put Quick Step Plus on him as well, to have a Quick Step jockey centre-back who can chase down these players, or more importantly, chase down and then twist and turn with them as they try and find space in the box. And then next to him, I've got, inspired by yourself, actually, is it the Osterwald Evo from way back when I picked up the game around Thunderstruck? I listened to you and I went, yes, I shall do that. I've made him more of he also has Quick Step now, but I've made him more of this sort of like bruiser intercept style. So hopefully those two players at centre back. But yeah, generally I will not use a centre back without Quick Step. It feels really important in terms of, because there isn't also a Rapid equivalent for off the ball. When a player has ball, Rapid activates when you're running, especially if lengthy. It can be brilliant, or it can compensate for someone who isn't lengthy. Whereas with the defenders, you can't have that equivalent of like, oh, I've got up to speed and now I can have a top speed boost, which I think is why we often see those attackers bursting past defenders. In the past, there used to be a conversation about, are players slower with the ball than without the ball? And so maybe there was a bit more of an equilibrium between defenders and attackers. But then generally we had defenders with terrible pace. Now that we have defenders with really good pace, the attackers maybe need those play styles to keep some sort of advantage. And so for me, at least, I try and play a high line, and maybe I get insane with it sometimes. So I need that Quick Step just to help me out when I've jumped up.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I was looking at that, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, who does look good, but doesn't have Quick Step at all. And I think considering you can't make him lengthy, he's that SBC, I think that is a concern. He might get, I guess, a Quick Step added to the player through upgrades, but actually, I don't know, I just think players now in defensive positions, they are kind of requiring that Quick Step, and even I think, although lengthy can help you a lot, I still think it just makes that much difference over the shorter distances, particularly, that you need that just to I guess I say shorter distances, I don't mean like really short distances, but like, getting that bit of acceleration to keep up with the player, I think is kind of key. So yeah, maybe we do now move on a bit, because we've covered a few of the players that we've had over the last week, and it might be worth talking briefly about evolutions, just so that we've covered that. But it's interesting, I don't know that there's a huge amount to say on it, because we've had a few kind of less, I guess, like exciting evolutions. I would say that the clinical creator one, just a rogue timed Evo, one of those ones that you submit and forget about, only 90 minutes long, got released, which does look, decent, but, not like, it's funny, I'm saying it's decent because it's two solid playstyle pluses, but it isn't the most maybe appealing. Apart from that, you can't put 5-star skill players in there, I think. And you also don't get a skill move upgrade. So that's a bit of a shame because it goes to 89. But yeah, we've had some sort of maybe even actively like not good evos in a way. Like I was looking at that reinforced evolution, and that gives the I was going to say Enforcer isn't terrible, but I don't think it's something you'd want as a playstyle plus, it feels like.
I think there's a certain playstyle, as in game playstyle as opposed to the feature, that maybe Enforcer Plus is amazing. You know, there are some people who are absolute wizards on that L2 button and can just basically walk up the pitch by bouncing off your players. But unless you're that player, yeah, I think you're right. You know, maybe having it as a silver is enough. I've got it on one of my midfielders, and I just like it for that if I need a second, especially if my connection's no good, which, as you'll know, Ben, has been a bit dodgy so far today. It gives me that second to, you know, compose myself in midfield. But as a gold, especially when we've only got two, yeah, you probably feel like the opportunity cost is not worth it. One thing I'd be interested to try with an evolution like that, which feels like you're just going to ignore it, is sticking it on a live card, maybe even one of these fantasy FPL cards. Because if you get the correct upgrades, and we know that often your playstyle plus that you've put through an Evo on a live card can be replaced by the one they earn through their live upgrades, potentially you could go and get, is it base bruiser, some okay attribute upgrades, and then have Enforcer Plus replaced with, like, could you put it on 𝗬𝗍𝗴𝗏, who's 80 physical, has got pinged, I think, here? If he goes and gets intercept or 𝘃𝗲𝗿𝘀 or something and replaces your Enforcer, that's a very fortunate but very big upgrade on that card, I think. So maybe there's a bit of, you know, gamemanship we can try here.
Yeah, it is actually interesting because, yeah, that's something that, I don't know, not everyone may be familiar with, but it seems like sometimes it's kind of unclear, like the live card upgrade of a playstyle plus replaces the playstyle plus that you evolved onto that card, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's an interesting point. Maybe also something, if they end up introducing playstyle plus upgrades for showdowns, which they probably will at some point, is maybe also something to look out for as a way to kind of get round a bad playstyle plus from an Evo. Yeah, interesting. Talking of Evos, we have had quite an interesting leak about FUT birthday. So I think maybe a slightly earlier break for this middle section, and then we'll come back and talk about that and kind of what it means in the context of the game overall, because, yeah, from a game design perspective, it is very, very interesting. So, yeah, we'll come to that right after this break. Hello, and welcome back after the break. Right, yes, as I trailed there, we are going to see something, I think, quite interesting. It looks like, potentially, for FUT birthday. Leakers are essentially saying that you'll be able to add whatever playstyle plus, well, actually, I don't know, I just said the perfect playstyle plus combo. So it seems like the players that are being released for FUT birthday, not the heroes and icons, won't have playstyle pluses. You'll be able to add your own choice of playstyle pluses, presumably through evolutions. What this means, I guess, is that these players would become untradeable, as in, if you put a player for an evolution, they become untradeable. So it seems like once you add the playstyle pluses, that would happen. It's unclear if they're going to be released with regular playstyles, which would obviously be quite a big factor. But it's possible, of course, that they just release them without any playstyle pluses, any playstyles. It's just the players' stats, essentially, you're looking at. And FUT birthday players have previously been 5-star, 5-star, so that seems quite likely. And then I guess you're picking your perfect selection of playstyles. Actually makes the whole playstyle ranking thing we've been doing, which is, 2 playstyle pluses, 8 regular playstyles. Obviously useful for the playstyle pluses, but potentially if they allow you to add regular playstyles too, those kind of choices we've been making and suggesting should be quite helpful. Because, yeah, that's a huge departure from what you'd expect. And obviously, from a market perspective, it's also really interesting. Maybe we just cover the kind of concept initially, like the idea that players are getting released without playstyle pluses, potentially regular playstyles, and you're adding them. Is that something that you think is going to be popular or interesting to the player base?
So I think, yeah, purely from a concept point of view, for me at least, the way I enjoy engaging with the game, and I think the way a lot of other people do, that idea of customization and making a player my own and a little bit different, or if you want just optimizing the player, making sure they have the best meta playstyles is really, really attractive. And so I think an idea like this, we'll see how it's executed and we'll see what the unintended consequences are. But as an idea is really solid, and I would love to take it further, play with it more. Is it something we could do with all cards, or is Evolutions less of a, we can cover this again in a minute, I think, but is Evolutions less of a, I take a card and I evo them and that's almost the end point? Is it a constant tweaking and changing of my players throughout the cycle? Do all cards in packs end up not having playstyles or playstyle pluses at all? And the idea of Evos is that you customize those cards, so we are presented with like a base template for a card, and then we get to customize them more. Obviously, there's a lot of, as I think you said, the unintended consequences and knock-ons from that. But as a concept, there's an awful lot of room to play here, and I'm excited to see. I hope that it goes well in the next week or two, and it's something they can bring back in the future with refinements.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, a lot of, let's say, committed players who are really knowledgeable about the impact that playstyles have are generally quite kind of, I guess what would be the word, like dismissive of players that they might see that maybe are lacking a certain playstyle or have a certain selection of playstyles that are going to prevent that player being evoed and adding the playstyles they want to that player. Now, slightly bad timing for the content team. EA have said they're going to release a patch for some playstyles, which I think is actually a bit of a concern, because it means that people might be unsure about whether to, I don't know whether it will come before FUT birthday or not, that update, but like people might be unsure about whether to put certain playstyles on because they might become less effective or more effective. That remains to be seen. But obviously, yeah, like for that aspect of, oh, well, I can dismiss this player because they don't have the playstyle selection I want, that is obviously potentially not going to be the case. Although, again, we don't know if that's going to be both playstyle pluses and regular playstyles. So it could be that actually, because for me, I think like it would be greatly reduced in terms of the excitement and potential of it if you don't get the choice of regular playstyles and it's just the playstyle pluses. But actually, like, it's still exciting because if you're able to choose literally any playstyle pluses, that's quite strong. But then you're thinking like, oh, like, am I upgrading? You have a bit more of a dilemma because you might be upgrading a regular playstyle to a playstyle plus, etc., etc. And also, I guess there's a big question, which is it going to cost to upgrade them? Like, is there going to be a cost to it? Which I think maybe would surprise me a little bit, considering you're presumably going to have to, pay for these players, or, packing a player isn't exactly a common thing necessarily. Obviously, maybe some of the cheaper ones it will be, but that is interesting as well, right? Because if it also is unlimited and you can do as many as you want, you potentially could build like a whole squad of tiki-taka plus players, right? Or something like that. Like if that is the case, which does seem a bit far. So maybe there's going to have to be some kind of like restrictions in the mix as well, because also it would devalue, I guess, people's evolutions to some extent if that was possible, because that's quite powerful if it does work like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of caveats with this, and I think, as often is the case, the execution is key. So when talking about playstyles, and you mentioned the potential patch that will change how some of the most loved playstyle pluses work, I think when implementing something like this, you always want to be careful that you are adding, not taking away from your players. So a good example is probably the low-driven last year, which I think probably was just something they didn't have ready earlier in the cycle, and so it was introduced later, as opposed to them inventing it during the cycle for reasons. But that was adding a mechanic that, in theory, was already in game, because you could kind of do it. I remember you talking about like low-powered shots and everything, but it solidified it as a mechanic and brought a playstyle plus that then elevated it. You could have it in content, you could use it in evos. Even though that made my strikers that didn't have low-driven less valuable in relative terms, it did it by adding a new thing, which I could go and acquire and add to my team, and brings me a bit of joy. Whereas if you nerf, let's just say, tiki-taka, but it's not because long passes are now amazing, and so I want that instead, all you've done is take something away from me, and something that I potentially invested time and real money in. That can be a very frustrating experience. Even if it's done with the idea of improving gameplay, which, is a noble cause, I think they need to be careful with how that is executed. You could probably apply this here, right, where if we're picking playstyles that either devalue evolutions I've built or wipe so many coins off the market, maybe change how we view packs. So I think if I'm spending my coins or real money on packs and getting players that don't have playstyles, And then if I have to put a playstyle on them to make them usable, right? I can't just use that player in theory without a playstyle plus, because as we've discussed before, playstyles are very powerful in this year's game, even just psychologically. I see a little goal button come up, that tickles my brain in the right way, so I think it does a thing. No one's going to use, if Mbappe's in this team, people will use Mbappe. But everyone else, you're not going to use this player without a playstyle plus. So if you pack them, you have the choice of, do I sell or do I make this player untradeable and like lock away potentially millions of coins for myself? The impact on the market there, and you know, Nate, I'd love to hear his thoughts on this. One of two things, I guess, will happen. Those expensive players, the top tier in this team, will very quickly become rare and more expensive, I guess, because they're either going to be recycled on the market or made untradeable and so removed from, you know, anyone else having them. But also, are people potentially going to be locking away, removing a load of coins from the game? Because you're, you know, if you're buying a £2.5 million £2.5 million coin player from the market and then making them untradeable, you've burned those coins.
Yeah.
So are we going to see like a general market dip, especially with the time of year it is, but the top tier actually explode in price? I'm super interested to hear, you know, someone like Nate's thoughts on that.
Yeah, it will be interesting. And it's actually not like we don't have a precedent to some extent around this, actually, because we've had players in the past. Like we had 𝘵𝘂, for example. More recently, we had the 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦𝘀𝘲 players that actually... I know we got the SBC versions of 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦, so slightly different. But that 𝘵𝘂 went essentially extinct. There was an R9, I think, which by the end of the cycle was, I think, extinct. So these kind of tradable players that get converted to untradeable because of evolutions, and then their rarity increases. That's certainly something that I think we are likely to see again to some extent. And it also shows that people are willing to do this, right? And it's not something that, because I guess, you know, people might, and I think you see responses to this leak, you know, people are like, this is madness. What, like people are converting tradables to untradables potentially, and obviously I think it's unlikely we can say that. I just don't imagine they're going to add a mechanic into the game to allow these players to be tradable. So yeah, I think that is something that people are going to be like, almost like, oh, this is strange. But actually, we've seen it quite a bit. And you know, it's not like all the Evos I see out there are all first owner players, right? Like people are evolving tradable players all the time. It's just the idea that these are like pinnacle impacts players that, you know, would typically, you know, command a very high price because they're like marquee players that have been released to sell packs, and now those that could be worth millions, and now they become untradeable, which is quite interesting. I wonder, and I'd be interested to know what you think. It feels like actually the way the game's been going anyway, and you talked about having loads of coins left at the end of previous cycle. I think for a lot of players, this probably won't bother them that much because there has been such a shift away from coins being valuable, actually. And I know, you know, that can scare some people because they're like, oh, well, the tradable market's been a big part of the game. Are they looking to remove that? But actually, this could demonstrate that they're looking to kind of tie it into the market to some extent. You still need coins, but you've got to be, you're willing to lock them away. And it's like Evos you can buy with coins as well. So they're looking, it almost feels like maybe they're experimenting with new ways of using people's coins to some extent.
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't want them ever to remove the transfer market. Obviously, various exploits and all that sort of stuff aside, you know, all of this is, there's always exploits, and you know, hopefully they can close any loopholes there, like they did with the price ranges back in the day. I would never want them to remove the transfer market. If anything, I think you can do more with it as a gameplay concept, because I think we've seen them lean more into, you know, traders being a valid way of playing the game. In the past, it's, you know, a long time ago, it was maybe almost seen as a slightly dirty, you know, you play the game to play the game, and people who trade for coins, that's not what you're meant to do. You're meant to earn your coins. Whereas I think now live cards, right? We know that that's how that works, that people are deliberately trying to time their buys and sells to earn coins. As I mentioned earlier, I think for me, at least, the important thing is I want to make sure I use those coins. But I don't see the signs that they would take away the transfer market. If anything, as you say, they would expand what you use it for. So at the moment, it is obviously tradable players. So, you know, we get our Evos, they become untradeable, which typically are lower value players. But maybe we've seen with your Cruyffs and your Henrys, as you say, people are willing to lock their coins up more. Maybe that's because coins are more attainable. But I would love to see a world where, if they can get over the obvious exploits that would be introduced here, Evos aren't untradeable. You know, when I Evo a player, it stays tradable. And that opens up a new gameplay loop for someone like 𝘵ощ, who, instead of just making amazing Evos himself and then coming on here and sharing them with us and helping us out, he almost is providing, not quite a service, right? But his angle for the transfer market is, I go grab a player, I Evo them to absolute perfection, and then I sell them on the transfer market. And that is how I grind my own account up. It isn't just buying and selling it, or isn't just playing the game. There is this new angle where I am, to link it to real football, I'm an academy now. I'm not a Chelsea wheeling and dealing. I'm not a Man City winning the trophies. I am Southampton. That's how I run my ultimate team. And I think that would be a really interesting angle to explore the game with. I've said it a few times. Absolutely acknowledge there are massive exploits with this, and that's hopefully why they would spend some time developing it. But that's the direction I would love to see this go in.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like, especially if it was, say, like, a player who is tradable initially would remain tradable through evolutions, and maybe a player who was untradable initially would not switch obviously to being tradable after that evolution. So there's still a distinction. There's you're not using it to like increase to make a player tradable from untradable, I guess. You're instead using it to sort of boost up an existing tradable player, and as you say, could open up. It's almost like I don't know, it goes alongside investing in the trading world, and allows people who are kind of more gameplay focused to maybe achieve something from that. I think the big tricky thing would be player discovery, because I don't know how easy it would be for people to recognize on the market, that's a good player, or to seek out a good player. You'd probably have to improve the transfer market search functionality a lot to be able to allow people to kind of find the players with the specific play style combinations they wanted. But yeah, for sure. I mean, we've seen it loads over the course of the last few cycles where you see someone's Evo and you're like, that would be, one of the best players in the game, essentially. And that, is then something that person who's built that player could benefit from financially, which is interesting. And also potentially, it's almost allowing the players to create their own content almost like in the game that is then sellable and can make someone's gameplay experience more interesting, who wouldn't really be able to put in the time or have the skills to evolve that player themselves, which is cool.
I think that's an interesting sort of segue into something that I'd love to. We probably don't have the time for to indulge me here fully, but the idea of setting gameplay aside, which I think you can ask this question of as well, but on a content side, what is it that the game is trying to achieve? So what is the user story here? I go into the game and I do what to achieve what? And I think over the years, adding, we've got Team of the Week, we've got the Players of the Month, we've got various event-styled cards, we've got SBCs, then we have weekly or every other week a new promo. And I think having promos basically being ever-present and rotating throughout the year has probably been very, very good for EA in terms of their income, right? Because there's a constant reason to buy packs. But also it's good for us, it's fresh. But it does also actually devalue a lot of the discard players are discard, because even if they're really good players, I have a million of those types of players, and I can only play 11 at the same time. Maybe 15 if I do make subs, but I can't actually use all these players. They've tried to solve some of that with the various events and tournaments that come in, but then you see people say, well, I want to just use them on my team. I Evo this amazing player and I can never actually use them in any of the game modes. So I think, it's a yearly cycle game. It's a very, very hard thing to do, but I'd love to know what the sort of direction is with all these different strands of ways of gaining players and changing players and improving how I play. What is it we're trying to run towards here? For me, I would love, and this is massive up in the air, massive holes in it, couldn't do it in a year's cycle, but the idea of, and this maybe pursues that fantasy angle that we were talking about earlier, where the players that are provided in packs are almost like a base template, and then everything you do with them lets you take them in the direction you want, whether that's making them live. Potentially you could replace Team of the Week with something like this, and I think Team of the Week has only been relevant for Evos, but often many months after that player was released, so there's no immediate reason to seek that player out. Or SPC content, right? And SPCs are a different discussion. I think the way those work is maybe a little outdated, although it's a brilliant mechanic for players I have in my club that I have nothing else to do with. If you removed them, 99% of the players in the game are dead, so don't remove them, but maybe we can finesse them. But in terms of Team of the Week, it used to be, we spoke about it earlier, that connection to real life. I would watch a player play in real life, see them score a goal, and in my case, back in FIFA 18 or whenever it was, I would see Aguero score another hat-trick and very quickly run to the app and try and sell my info on Aguero, because I knew I was in big trouble and I needed to get the one next week or I'd lose a lot of coins. That is kind of fun. I enjoy, obviously at the time I didn't enjoy it, it was panic, but it's a really nice link between, to put it in a sort of, business sense, I'm not currently playing FIFA. A thing happened. I'm now playing FIFA. that's good for their bottom line. So I think something like Team of the Week being maybe that fantasy style card we just discussed, right, where it upgrades throughout the year. Very small upgrades, but based on their real life performance. They scored a goal, +1 to finishing. Something like that throughout the year would be interesting. And then taking these event cards, maybe like they're experimenting with here, and providing a base for you to then do something with EVOs. I think if you spent enough time working on this as well, it would hopefully help you control the power curve and control this slight disconnect we have between players in packs and how powerful they are and how optimized they can be versus EVOs. Look at, again, to bring Venny up, look at his team. Every single player he has is basically better than anyone you can pack who isn't over 10 million. Because he's, a phrase we often hear in game design is that, the players want to optimize the fun out of your game. And that's fine. That's kind of what Venny's done. Not that he doesn't find fun in it, but he has optimized his players to the point where packs are almost useless to him. So can I solve that problem? Can I instead make packs the ingredients that he uses to create his players? Something like that.
Yeah. It does feel like, we've occasionally seen evolutions through SBCs, but it's something that, maybe needs to be looked at as evolutions become more and more important to the game, a way that you can more directly convert fodder into evolutions, essentially, because at the moment they are kind of detached, apart from here and there. But maybe that's fine to some extent. But I don't know, the SBC system also feels, as you're saying, kind of a little bit outdated at this point. So it'd be interesting to see if they kind of think about correcting that to some extent. But actually going back to your point, I think, I do think from what you're saying, you feel like evolutions are kind of the future of FC game design. And I guess, do you think that's sitting comfortably with EA? Because it is something that I think, although, yes, they've steered the game towards it, I guess it does change the dynamic to some extent, because basically packs used to be just the be-all and end-all of the game, whether that's purchasing with real money or it's unlocking those through rewards. Do you think that a shift towards evolutions is actually a good thing for the game longer term?
I think firstly it's obviously important to acknowledge that if I have a personal affinity for evolutions, that doesn't mean everyone does. And so we should obviously provide various routes to play this game that all different players can engage with. And it certainly doesn't mean I'm right. Someone here might be listening going, dude, Evos? Nah, come off it. Absolutely fair enough, please, and we should design a way for you to play the game and enjoy it. For me personally, I think Evos, I enjoy them, but I do think as a concept, as a mechanic, they have a lot of potential. And the thing that's strong for me with them is that kind of link between what do I want to do when I log into the game? I want to build my ultimate team. I want to feel something for the players I'm using, whether that's because they have, like yourself, amazing 5-star skills, or they're linked to my real life club. Evos is the best way, the best mechanic they have to give me that feeling. And I think just to, very, very gently relate it to the game I work on in my day job, one of those powerful things we have is a young player, 16, you discovering them and you training them up, making them this, Ballon d'Or winner at 25 and then retiring at a club at 35 and just having that story. That is so powerful as a reason for someone to play and love your game that I think that, for me at least, is something that EA would benefit from pursuing. And when I say benefit, not just in terms of people enjoying the game, but monetarily, right? They are a business, they need to make money. People will disagree over how they make the money, and that's fine. But ultimately, I personally am much happier to pay for something that brings me a little bit of joy, brings me a bit of connection, and I know what I'm getting, give or take, than maybe a roulette that is a pack. Although every now and again, when if I go and pack Team of the Year 𝘁 or something, brilliant, that felt amazing. But chances are I felt a bit rubbish before I managed to feel that amazing feeling.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I do really think your point about kind of, it's almost like that narrative experience is just not there for Ultimate Team at the moment. I think it feels very, very transactional, and it's what we were complaining about earlier, basically, where you're doing a checklist. It's almost like you're doing your weekly shop rather than playing the game at times.
Yeah, completely.
It's just checklists and kind of can feel quite monotonous and repetitive, even if they try and cloak it in different ways. And I think, if they can tap into something more narrative around evolutions, bring back Alex Hunter, for example, that might
put him in the Harry Kane SPC.
That might kind of reignite some of that kind of interest, which I think has sort of gone missing. Although I don't think Ultimate Team has ever been hugely about that, in the past. But people used to kind of make their own narratives, I think, within the game, and because there's so much noise and so many things to do, that has people's own kind of narratives around the game have been lost, apart from people maybe doing past and presents and things like that. So that's kind of a new dynamic. But yeah, I think for the broader player base, tapping into that would make a lot of sense. And I think that's probably quite a nice way to end the podcast on that positive. But yeah, it's been, I mean, I think we've only kind of scratched the surface in terms of the amount we could be talking about here. But I'm sure we'll have you back to talk more. And yeah, as always, to the listeners, anything that's come up that you're particularly interested in, you'd like us to revisit, or new things you'd like us to discuss, then, do send those in the various different ways. But yeah, Seb, really great to have you on the podcast. Greatly appreciate it.
My friend, thank you so much. I mean, you first started a couple of years ago and wasn't able to make it, so absolutely delighted to come join you now. And if nothing else, it's incredibly cathartic to have the opportunity to go, yes, but Evos, I love them. You should all listen to my opinions about Evos. And yeah, hopefully people find it interesting, and hopefully we can discuss it more in the future. But
certainly, yeah.
Ultimately, thank you very much.
No, thank you. Really appreciate it. And yeah, a big thank you, of course, to all you listeners, viewers tuning in various different ways. If you would like to subscribe, you can do that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, but also on YouTube as well. If you're over on YouTube, yeah, drop a comment with any thoughts you have. You can also leave a like, of course. And if you'd like an extra podcast every week, including the gameplay podcast this week, which should feature, actually mentioned a few times in this podcast, maybe unsurprisingly, Coach 𝗫𝘀𝘀, then you can check that out on the Patreon. Just search support for weekly, and it'd be great to have your support. If you are a current supporter, then a huge thank you for supporting the podcast, and a big thank you too to those icon patrons:
Dave B, Darren W, Hugh J, Rob W, Josh R, Ralph, Brian, Michael B, Adam R, Make B, Michael H, Rob S, Michael K, Neil P, Jake S, Tom B, Alex M, Damon H, L, James B, Sam K, The Shirt Locker, Lee A, Chris G, Mark M, Dom P, Rob P, Roger D, Waterman, Also Ran, and 𝗫𝗎𝘂. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, Hugh J, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato FUT for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add though. Ultimate Team is a bit like life really. It has its many ups and downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.